Moved over to the Alert Center. It is 6:02 this morning. A girl missing for nearly 6 years has been found safe here in North Carolina, and her non-custodial mother is in jail. I want to show you this picture we got overnight from the Buncombe County Jail of Heather Unbehaun.
A woman looked at a teenage girl standing near a store called Plato's Closet, and something did not add up. She had seen this face before, not in real life, on a screen. It was May of 2023 in Asheville, North Carolina, and the face belonged to a girl who had been missing for almost 6 years. Her name was Kayla Unbehaun. She was 9 years old when she disappeared. Now she was 15, and the woman standing next to her was not a stranger. It was her own mother. If cases like this should not be forgotten, stay with me. And if you believe missing children deserve to be remembered by name, consider staying on this channel for more respectful true stories like hers. Kayla Unbehaun was born into a family that, like many families, did not stay together. Her parents, Ryan Iskerka and Heather Unbehaun, separated, and like many separated parents, they shared custody. For a while, that arrangement worked. Kayla spent time with both her mother and her father. She had 2 homes, 2 routines, 2 people who loved her. But over time, the relationship between her parents grew difficult. Disagreements turned into legal disputes. And by 2016, a family court had already started making decisions about how Kayla's life would be structured, including decisions about her medical care. Then, in early 2017, the court made a bigger decision. Ryan was given full primary custody of Kayla. Heather was allowed visitation, not full custody. Visitation, that distinction matters. Because what happened next was not just a family disagreement, it was a decision by one parent to ignore what a court had already decided. This is an important point to understand before the rest of the story unfolds. What happened to Kayla is often described using dramatic words: kidnapped, abducted, taken. But this was not a stranger pulling a child off the street. This was a parent, one who loved her daughter, choosing to break a legal agreement and disappear with her instead. That distinction does not make the story any less serious. In many ways, it makes it more complicated. Because the person searching for Kayla was not just looking for his daughter. He was looking for someone he had once shared a life with. In July of 2017, Kayla went to spend time with her mother. It was around the 4th of July. Some reports mention a parade. Others mention a camping trip. The small details differ. But one fact does not. Kayla was supposed to come home on July 5th. Ryan drove to Heather's home in Wheaton, Illinois, to pick up his daughter. But when he got there, no one answered. Kayla was not there. Heather was not there. Relatives told him the 2 of them had gone camping and had not come back yet. At first, that might have sounded like an innocent delay, a late return, a miscommunication. Picture that moment for a father, standing outside an empty house, expecting a simple pickup, and instead finding no one there, and no clear answer waiting for him either. That is where this case truly begins. Not with a dramatic crime scene, but with an empty driveway and a question no one could answer yet. But hours turned into days, and days turned into silence. Ryan filed a missing person report. His daughter was 9 years old, and under the law, she was supposed to be in his care. By the end of July, investigators were treating this as more than a delay. On July 28, 2017, a felony warrant was issued for Heather Unbehaun's arrest. The charge was child abduction. At that point, Heather became a wanted, alleged abductor in the eyes of the law, not yet convicted, but formally accused. Investigators began looking into where she might have gone. They looked at her contacts, her travel history, places she had once talked about wanting to live. Some of those leads pointed toward Georgia. Others pointed toward the East Coast. There was even a theory that she wanted a quieter, off-the-grid kind of life, away from the systems that might track her. For a long time, none of those leads turned into anything solid. So, where did they actually go? Investigators believed Heather may have first taken Kayla to Georgia. Later reporting suggested the 2 of them eventually settled in southern Oregon, staying there for several years before moving again. But in the summer of 2017, none of that was known yet. All Ryan knew was that his daughter was gone. And here is a question worth sitting with. In a country full of cameras, school records, medical systems, and databases, how does a parent and a child disappear for 6 years? The answer, painfully, is that it happens more often than people think. Family abduction cases do not always trigger the same emergency alerts as stranger abductions. There is no unknown attacker to search for, just a parent who chose to stay hidden. While the search continued, Ryan did not stay silent. He gave interviews. He asked the public for help. He made it clear that he was not trying to keep Kayla from loving her mother. He simply wanted her home, safe, and living under the custody a court had already decided on. He said he knew there were people in her extended family who loved her, and who wanted nothing more than to see her again. He also wrote to her. He wrote letters meant for a daughter he could not reach. He told her that her bed was still there, that her place at the dinner table had not been given away, that his family had not forgotten her, and never would. In one appeal, he spoke to her directly, telling her that he was never going to stop looking, no matter how long it took. Imagine writing letters to a child who may never receive them. Imagine speaking into a camera, hoping that somehow, somewhere, she is watching. That is what years of searching for a missing child can look like. Not one dramatic search scene, but a quiet, repeated act of hope. Family and supporters started a public page called Bring Kayla Home. It shared her photo. It shared updates. It kept her name alive, year after year, even when there was nothing new to report. It gave Ryan a way to reach people beyond his own community, and it helped move Kayla's story from local news into a wider public conversation. Because that is often what a missing child case becomes. Not one big breakthrough, but years of small efforts to make sure a name is not forgotten. So why did no one find her sooner? Part of the answer, investigators later said, is that Heather and Kayla were not hiding in the wilderness, cut off from the world. They were living in communities, going to stores, existing in public, ordinary spaces. They simply were not using their real identities while they did it. One of those efforts came from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. A 9-year-old does not look the same at 15. So forensic artists created age progression images, imagining what Kayla might look like as she grew older. These images were shared publicly, more than once as the years passed. It was an attempt to solve a simple but difficult problem. The world only had photos of a little girl, but the little girl was growing into a teenager the public had never seen. More than one age-progressed image was released over the years, updated as more time passed. Each one was a kind of educated guess, built by forensic artists trained to imagine how a child's face changes with age. Those images were shared across news outlets and social media, again and again, keeping Kayla's story from quietly fading into an old file in a drawer. Then, in November of 2022, Kayla's story reached a much bigger audience. Her case was featured in a parental abduction segment on Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries. Suddenly, a case that had mostly stayed within Illinois news was being seen across the country and beyond it. Her photos were shared again, her story was told again, and somewhere out there, someone was watching. That brings us back to May of 2023 and a store called Plato's Closet in Asheville, North Carolina. According to reporting on the case, someone recognized Kayla from that media coverage. Exactly how the recognition happened is described slightly differently across different reports. What is consistent is this. A person noticed the teenage girl, connected her face to the missing child case they had seen in the media, informed store staff, and police were called. When officers arrived and spoke with Heather and Kayla, they were reportedly given a false name and a false birth date. But police did not simply take that information at face value. They cross-checked it against missing person records and available photographs. And the answer became clear. This was Kayla Unbehaun. Nearly 6 years after she disappeared, she was found. She was 15 years old. And she was safe. Think about that gap for a moment. 6 years. long enough for a 9-year-old to become a teenager, long enough for birthdays, school years, and countless ordinary days to pass, all while a father waited without knowing where his daughter was sleeping at night. Heather was arrested on a fugitive warrant that same day. Kayla was placed into the care of North Carolina's Department of Social Services while authorities in Illinois were contacted. Ryan traveled to North Carolina, and after almost 6 years apart, a father and daughter were reunited. It would be easy to describe that moment as simply happy, and in many ways it was, but it was also complicated. Kayla still knew her father, but she had spent 6 formative years of her life, from age 9 to age 15, away from him, away from her old home, and away from the identity she had before July of 2017. Coming home was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one focused on rebuilding a relationship and adjusting to a life that had changed enormously. Ryan publicly thanked law enforcement, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the Bring Kayla Home supporters who had kept her case alive. He also asked, respectfully, for privacy, so that he and his daughter could reconnect without the public watching every step. Heather's legal case, meanwhile, was only beginning. She posted bond in North Carolina on the fugitive warrant at $250,000. She was later released from custody there. She then turned herself in to authorities in Kane County, Illinois, where the original child abduction charge had been filed. In Illinois, a separate bond was set at $10,000. She was placed under GPS monitoring and barred from leaving the state. For more than 2 years, the case moved slowly through the court system. During that time, Heather reportedly made public claims about the custody situation and about Ryan. But those claims were not proven facts. They were her own allegations, not findings established by any court. The court did not allow arguments that the original custody orders were invalid or unconstitutional to be used as a defense in the child abduction case. In other words, whatever her personal reasons were, the law was clear. A parent does not get to override a court order simply by disagreeing with it. As the case moved toward trial, there were more delays. At one point, Heather asked the court to let her replace her attorney. That request was denied. The trial date kept getting closer. By August of 2025, the case was finally headed to trial. Jury selection was about to begin. And then, just before that process started, Heather changed her plea. She pleaded guilty to child abduction. 8 years after Kayla disappeared, this was no longer just an accusation. It was an admission, made in court, by Heather herself. On October 9, 2025, she was sentenced. She received 2 years of probation. She was given credit for time already served. And she was ordered to wear an electronic monitor. She did not receive a prison sentence. For some viewers, that outcome may feel unsatisfying. 6 years missing, a court battle lasting more than 2 years, and in the end, probation rather than prison. Could the sentence have been harsher? Under the charge she pleaded guilty to, she had faced the possibility of a prison term. Instead, the court chose probation, time already served, and ongoing electronic monitoring. That was the legal system's final answer in this case. But the legal outcome does not erase what happened. Heather Unbehaun is, by her own guilty plea, a convicted child abductor. That is the legal reality of this case now. What matters just as much is what came after. According to a later update from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Kayla, now 17, was doing well. She was making friends. She was enjoying her senior year of high school. After everything, that update matters. Because a missing child case is not only about the disappearance, it is about what happens next for the child who has to rebuild an ordinary life. Think about what that rebuilding actually involves. New friendships to form, a father to get to know again, not as a memory, but as a daily presence, a sense of normal life to rebuild from the ground up, at an age when most teenagers are simply worrying about school and friendships, not reconstructing an entire identity. The public was not given every detail of those 6 years, and that is likely by design. Kayla's privacy, and her ability to move forward without her past being turned into public entertainment mattered more than satisfying curiosity. What we do know is simple. She survived it. She came home. And by the time her case reached its legal conclusion, she was, by all accounts, doing well. That, in itself, is a kind of quiet victory. Not the dramatic kind seen in crime dramas, but the real kind. A young woman getting to simply live her life again. Could this have happened without a streaming platform? A Facebook page or age progression software? Almost certainly not in the same way. 6 years earlier, none of those tools guaranteed a resolution. But together, over time, they created enough public awareness that a stranger's memory could connect a face on a screen to a face in a store. This case is often remembered because of an unusual detail. A streaming documentary episode helped lead directly to a real child being found. But it is worth remembering that the episode alone did not solve this case. It took Ryan's years of public appeals. It took the letters he wrote that Kayla may not have read for years. It took the age progression images created by forensic artists imagining a face that had not been photographed in years. It took a private Facebook page run by ordinary supporters who refused to let her story fade. And it took one person, in one store, in one ordinary moment, choosing to say something instead of walking past. No single piece solved this case. All of them, together did. There is a lesson in that for every family still waiting for their own missing child to come home. Time does not erase a person's identity. A photo shared years later can still matter. A campaign that feels like it is going nowhere can still be seen by exactly the right person, at exactly the right moment. Cases like Kayla's also challenge a common assumption. Many people hear the words custody dispute and assume it is a private family matter, something that does not need urgent attention. But a parent who hides a child from a court-ordered guardian is not simply disagreeing about parenting. They are committing a crime, one that can shape a child's entire upbringing without that child ever having a say in it. Ryan and his wife Lisa later said that in the earliest days of the search, they sometimes felt like their case was not being taken as seriously as it deserved, in part because the person searching was simply a father, not a stranger hunting for a missing child. Advocacy organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children played an important role in pushing this case forward, treating it with the same seriousness any missing child case deserves. Kayla Unbehaun was not just a case file or a name on a missing poster. She was a 9-year-old girl who was supposed to come home on July 5, 2017, and did not. For 6 years, her father kept a place for her. He wrote to her, even when he had no way of knowing if she would ever read those words. And in May of 2023, in a shopping center in North Carolina, someone recognized her. She went home. Her mother eventually admitted, in a courtroom, what she had done, and a case that began with an empty driveway in Illinois. In the summer of 2017, finally reached its end. Not every missing child story ends this way. Some cases stay open for decades, without a store, a stranger, or a screen ever connecting the right dots. That is part of what makes Kayla's story worth telling. It is a reminder that a case going quiet does not mean it is over. It means the world is still waiting for one more person, in one more place, to look a little closer at a familiar face. Kayla is home now. Her father did not stop looking. And somewhere in an ordinary shopping center, an ordinary person decided that a familiar face was worth a second look. Sometimes, that is all it takes.